Hello everyone, and welcome to Part 6 of A Victory Garden for Maine, brought to you by the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. My name is Cara, and with me today are Pamela, Becca, and Laurie. In this video, we'll be discussing how to water your garden. Laurie, you have the first question.
Do I really have to water my vegetable garden? Don't get enough rain?
That's a great question, Laurie, and the answer is sometimes we do get enough rain and sometimes we don't. Although the amount of water a plant needs varies by crop, growth stage, and current conditions like temperature and humidity, a good general guideline is that most crops in our vegetable garden need 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches of water a week. In Maine, we fall short of that most months of the summer.
So do I need to give my plants 1.5 inches of water a week?
Remember, you are only watering to supplement rainfall. So if we get that much rain in a week, you may not need to water. The best way to monitor this is to get a rain gauge for your yard.
Great, so I get a rain gauge and check and empty it once a week and water based on that.
Essentially, although there are situations where you may have to water more often, like when you first plant transplants or seeds, you'll want to keep them consistently moist to give seeds time to germinate and seedlings favorable conditions to establish. When it is particularly hot and windy, you may have to water more since these conditions increase evaporation from the plant's leaves. And lastly, if you have sandy soil, you may find that you have to water more often. Sandy soil doesn't hold on to moisture well, so you may find you have to water as frequently as every few days.
Why not just water every day?
For established crops, watering every day is likely too often. Plant roots need oxygen, so you don't want the soil to be completely saturated all of the time. And overwatering is a waste of water and will move plant nutrients down in the soil past where the roots can access them. Adding a small amount of water every day is also not a good idea. You don't want to give your plants shallow, frequent waterings because when you only wet the top layer of the soil, you train your plant roots to grow very shallowly, which makes them very susceptible to wilting when the soil dries out. It is better to water deeply, less frequently, so you have a better developed root system.
In the past, I haven't watered on a schedule. I just wait until I see the plants wilt. Is that bad?
Yes, it is. Plants need water to photosynthesize. And if you let them dry out to the point of wilting, this means they aren't photosynthesizing and aren't growing to their full potential. Drought stress not only interferes with the plant's growth, it can also make them more susceptible to disease and insects. Plus, let a plant wilt too far and it may never recover. Lastly, that wilting you're seeing may actually be caused by other factors besides water, like freezing or high temperatures, excess salt, insect or rodent damage, pathogens, or other damage to the root system.
So what's the best way to know when to water?
The best way is always to get out there and feel the soil. When you water, you want to make sure that you are wetting at least the top 5 to 6 inches of the soil. So once you think you are done watering, dig down to make sure the water has reached that depth. Don't water again until the top few inches begin to dry out. If you squeeze a clump of soil and it breaks apart easily without leaving any moisture on your hand, it's definitely time to water. And make sure you are checking the soil where there are plant roots, not in your pathways.
So you mentioned sandy soil. My garden is very sandy, and in the summer, I just can't seem to keep up with the watering. Anything I can do?
The best thing you can do for a sandy soil is to increase your soil's organic matter levels, because organic matter is great at holding on to moisture. Organic matter is anything that is or was once living, so you could add compost, cover crop, or even mulch. But keep in mind it will take time for your organic matter to increase. Mulches not only add organic matter, but they're a great short-term solution because they're going to slow evaporation from the soil's surface, cutting down on how much you have to water.
Okay, I definitely realize I need to get better about watering. What do I need?
Once you've established when you need to water, you can then decide how you'd like to water your garden. You have many different options, such as watering by hand with a hose or watering can, using a sprinkler, or installing a drip irrigation system. Whatever method you choose, make sure it fits your budget and lifestyle. For an example, watering by hand may not be the best option for you if you already have a pretty hectic schedule and struggle to find time to work in your garden. Remember, you want to be sure to water deeply, and this can take a long time if you do it by hand.
I've heard about drip irrigation systems. What is this system? Is it something I could use in my home garden?
Drip irrigation is a network of plastic tubing that provides a slow and steady source of water for your plants over a few hours. The water is transported through a mainline system to your garden, where emitter tubing will carry the water directly to the base of your plants. All drip irrigation systems can be customized to your garden's size and style, and can even be used for container gardens. This is a great option for home gardeners, and the materials to install such a system are readily available, although you may have to order them online. Although there are upfront costs involved with purchasing a drip irrigation system, the more consistent and even watering and the time saved hand watering are going to be worth the investment.
Oh wow, drip irrigation sounds really great, but also complicated. How do I know what to order and where do I find these components?
You are in luck. There are many seed and garden supply companies that offer drip irrigation kits for home gardeners. I'd recommend that you start with one of these kits. Just be sure to purchase irrigation supplies from the same company. This will ensure that all of your irrigation components match and are intended for the same size system. These kits usually include mainline tubing that is a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch in diameter, emitter tubing or drip tape that is what actually distributes the water to your plants, filter and pressure regulator, which is going to be located at the beginning of your drip irrigation system connected to your main line, a punch tool that's going to allow you to connect emitter tubing or drip tape to the main line, fittings to connect tubes, which will essentially allow you to customize your drip irrigation system to the shape and size of your garden, couplers and goof plugs to fix accidental holes, and trust me, you'll definitely need this. Wire hold down pins. This allows you to keep your emitter tubing or drip tape in place in your garden beds.
So what about soaker hoses? Are those the same as a drip system?
The main difference between a drip irrigation system and a soaker hose is that the drip system is designed to provide an even amount of water anywhere in the system. Soaker hoses don't have this benefit, so you can end up with a really uneven distribution of your water, especially if you have any hills, even small ones in your garden. They also tend to degrade over time, but for some situations they may be a good locally available solution.
How do I determine the layout of my irrigation system?
Start by drawing a map of your garden. Be sure to identify where the water source is located and how far away it is from your garden. You'll also want to make note of any distinct slopes in that area. Next, think about where it makes sense to install your main line. Depending on your setup, your main line will typically start at your spigot or by the entrance of your garden. The main line will run alongside of your garden beds and can easily be buried in areas where it poses a tripping or lawn mowing hazard. If there are any 90-degree angles in your garden or you need to split off in a new direction, you can simply install an elbow or T-shaped fitting on the main line. You can also use a hose to connect your main line to your spigot and remove it when you're not using it. Finally, you can identify how your emitter tubing will be laid out in your garden beds and where they'll be connected to your main line. You can determine how far apart the tubing should be based on crops you plan on planting in your garden. If you're setting up irrigation for containers or raised beds that are taller than usual, you can use microtubing that doesn't contain emitters to reach the desired height. Then use a fitting to attach the emitter tubing for the area you'd like to irrigate.
So let me see if I understand this right. Drip tape or emitter tubing has small openings on it that allows the water to slowly drip. So how far away from the plant should these emitters be located?
Yes, that's correct. And the distance between those emitters can vary, so make sure to check the product details when purchasing. The emitter shouldn't be located too far from the plants. I'd say within a few inches. This may mean you'll need multiple emitter lines per bed if you have multiple rows of crops. If you're using drip tape, you'll want to make sure the side with the openings is facing up when it's installed. This will ensure that if there is any dirt in the system, it won't clog the emitters, and it allows you to efficiently inspect your system.
How would I use this system when I mulch my beds with straw or barrier fabric every season?
Using mulch with a drip irrigation system is an even better way to conserve water. You'll want to make sure you put your emitter tubing in place before laying down any mulch on top. When using barrier fabric or plastic, be mindful of where your emitter tubing is located underneath, especially when you're planting with a trowel or securing the fabric with garden staples. You'll want to avoid puncturing those irrigation lines as much as possible. They can be difficult to repair after planting.
Other than setting up this system, is there any regular maintenance I need to do? Can I leave the system out over the winter?
Drip irrigation systems should be checked regularly for leaks. Usually these are pretty easy to find when the system's turned on and can be easily fixed. It's always a good idea to keep extra supplies around because inevitably you'll need to make a repair. These systems can be left out over the winter, but it's always a good practice to blow out any extra water with an air compressor at the end of the season. Be sure to uncap the ends of the main line before blowing out the system, and store the filter and pressure regulators indoors if possible. If you use drip tape rather than emitter tubing, those lines can be removed from the fittings and stored inside for the winter. Otherwise, the flexible 1/4-inch tubing is sturdy enough to leave outside.
How long will I run my drip irrigation for?
This depends. Every irrigation system is designed to distribute water at a different rate. You can do complicated math to determine how long it will take to get the desired amount of water over the area you are irrigating. But the easiest solution is probably to do a test run and see how long the system takes to wet your soil at least 5 to 6 inches deep. Follow the same advice we mentioned before about how often to run your system.
Some of my friends use sprinklers to water their gardens. How does this method compare?
Sprinklers are a less efficient irrigation system because they broadcast the water broadly, meaning a lot more of it can evaporate before it reaches the soil. Sprinklers are better suited for when you're trying to germinate seeds in a general area, such as seeding a new lawn or direct seeding vegetable crops, like lettuce mix or carrots. You want to avoid using sprinklers for mature plants in order to keep the plant's leaves as dry as possible. Excess moisture on the leaves can create the perfect environment for certain disease pathogens.
Okay, good to know. I think I'm going to go the low-tech route using a watering can or a hose. Do you have any tips for me?
Anytime you use a watering can or hose, you'll want to make sure you water early in the day to cut down on evaporation while watering, and to allow enough time for the leaves to thoroughly dry out before nightfall. You'll also want to make sure you water at the base of the plant as much as possible. This will ensure that the leaves stay relatively dry to avoid environmental conditions where plant diseases thrive.
I do have a rain barrel that collects water from my roof and gutters. Is it safe to use this water to irrigate my vegetable garden?
No, I wouldn't recommend it because water from your roof can be contaminated with bird feces, so it's better to save it for your ornamental plantings.
In that case, I'll stick with using my well water for my vegetable garden, but I haven't had my well water tested in years. Should I be concerned? How do I get it tested?
It's always a good idea to have your well water tested on a regular basis. This will ensure that you are maintaining high food safety standards in your home garden. The state of Maine has some great resources online about private well water safety and testing, which includes a list of accredited labs that test drinking water across the state.
Thank you, Pamela, Becca, and Laurie. So to recap, vegetable gardens need 1.25 to 1.5 inches of water per week. Use a rain gauge to measure rainfall. When rainfall isn't sufficient, water deeply, being sure to wet at least the top 5 to 6 inches of soil. Don't water again until the top few inches dry out. Water at the base of the plant to avoid wetting the plant's leaves. Water early in the day. If your soil is drought-prone, add organic matter like compost or cover crop residue. Mulch your garden. Consider installing a drip irrigation system. They conserve water and they save time. They also provide a more efficient, uniform method of watering. Use clean, potable water. Get your water tested. More information is available on the University of Maine Cooperative Extension website and in the video description. Please join us for the next video on diagnosing what's wrong with your plant.